call to order the Green Mountain Care Board's hearing of December 18th. We have 2 hours scheduled, but a lot to pack in. We have the Brattleboro retreat. We have a presentation on the budget, and there's a potential vote noticed. We'll do that first, then the Medicare benchmark and a potential vote, then the OneCare budget and a potential vote, and last is an update on the AHEAD model and the state agreement that's been drafted and posted. First, we have approval of minutes from December 13th. I move that we approve the minutes.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Okay, thank you. Aye. The minutes are approved, and we'll keep it snappy and move right to Mr. Sutter.
Thank you. I'm sorry, my Teams just shut down 20 seconds ago, so I'm coming back. Let me share my screen. We have an updated staff recommendation to go over with the board today, and then call for a potential vote. This is not working like I expected. I'm so sorry. That's the old one. There we go. So our updated staff recommendation today, it's similar to what we presented last Friday, with language taken out about approving or capping individual commercial payers at the levels identified on the rate decomposition sheet. We thought, just for Brattleboro Retreat, given their operations and differences in their kind of how we can model their price impacts, it makes more sense to approve it as just an aggregate total commercial increase here. So that's the only change from the proposed or staff recommendation last Friday. Here's just standard language with those updates.
You mind if I hop in and just share a few
through
details
them,
on this slide, Matt?
Like, just pulling out that language about capping individual payers at a specific percentage, and just leaving it at the aggregate, and then additional language about having them submit updated income statement, balance sheet, and payer revenue workbook once they've finalized Medicaid rates for the state. These are all the same from Friday. And that was our template motion language from the other day. So I'm happy to leave the language up if you would like, Chair Foster or Mark. We could, if you would like to present anything about the language, obviously, go ahead.
Yeah, is my sound working?
Yes.
Great. Okay, good. Matt, if you pull up that presentation again, the slide after has updated language for the board today, which just reflects that one change that you touched on about the payer-specific language being removed. I can try to pull it up if that's...
Oh, I'm so sorry, Mark. My sound went out for a second. Were you asking me to?
Yeah, if you pull up that one again, I think slide 9. Yep. So this is for the board. This is the revision. You'll see the revision in red, which just removes that payer-specific cap for the retreat. Everything else remains the same as was presented last week. And Chair Foster, I'll turn it to you.
Thank you, and thanks for pulling that out. I have no comments or questions. I'm going to make the motion, see if there's a second, and we can have any board discussion or questions after that. So I move to approve Brattleboro Retreat's budget as follows, with fiscal year 25 NPR approved at a growth rate of not more than 0.75% over its fiscal year 24 approved budget, with fiscal year 25 overall change in charge and commercial negotiated rate increases approved at no more than 6.7% over current approved levels, and subject to the standard budget conditions previously approved by this board, with changes and additions as described, if any.
I'll second the motion.
And board comment, question, or discussion? Hearing none, I'll move to the healthcare advocate for any questions or comments they may have.
No questions from us, Chair Foster.
Thank you, Eric. And I'll open up to public comment on the motion via raise the hand. All right, quiet group today. In that event, I will ask for all board members in favor to please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye. And that is 4 votes in support of the motion. The motion carries, and Member Merman was absent from this vote. So thank you very much, Jill and Steve and Carl. Thank you very much for coming and for the good presentation to the board. We appreciate your work very, very much.
Thank you, and we appreciate the opportunity.
Have a good day.
You too.
Next on the agenda, Michelle Degree will present on the Medicare benchmark, and we also have a vote notice there.
Thank you, Chair Foster. I'm going to share my screen. Can you all see that?
Yes.
Okay. This is a short and sweet presentation today. So following up from last week, I'm here to just talk about the 2025 Medicare benchmark. As you'll recall, last week we walked through our staff recommendation, which is to use the maximum allowable trend for OneCare for the Vermont benchmark, which is 4% for non-ESRD and 7% for ESRD. Those are 0.2 below national growth. And additionally requesting the advanced shared savings of just over 10.3 million for the Blueprint for Health and SASH programs, the Medicare component of those programs. Again, just a reminder of the trade-offs for using that maximum trend. And I will highlight again sort of the con here. The maximum trend could potentially endanger the ability of the state to fulfill financial targets under the all-payer model agreement. We did touch on that a little bit last week, where the state may be kind of approaching that tipping point. Lindsay and I will be back with final data, hopefully earlier in 2025 to talk about that. A reminder of the board's prior trend limits and decisions. So for the most part, maximum trend has been used. And then I'll pause for any questions or comments, and I do have draft motion language on the next slide.
I think on this one, why don't we just go right to the draft motions and take questions and comments after. I move to approve the Medicare benchmark at the staff recommended maximum allowable trend rates of 4.0 for non-ESRD and 7.0 for ESRD, and to include the advance of $10,354,645 for the Blueprint for Health and SASH programs.
Second.
My only comment is that I do support this because I think it's important we maximize the federal dollars we possibly can at this time. And so I appreciate the staff's recommendation. I think it's the right way to go and consistent with prior practice. So I am in support of the motion that I made. Other board member comments or discussion or questions?
No, I don't have anything. I just wanted to thank Michelle and Lindsay for their work on the presentation and the analysis, and look forward to hearing more from them in the next month.
Any comment from the healthcare advocate?
No comment, Chair Foster.
And any public comment on the motion before the board? Okay, all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Tom, did you vote?
Yes. in favor.
Thank you. The motion carries with 4 members in support, and Member Merman was absent on this vote. And I'll just note this is a record for 2 motions to be approved by the board, which is great given the time pressures today. So thanks, everyone. And we'll move on to Michelle Sawyer and the OneCare budget staff presentation.
Wonderful. Thank you, Chair Foster. I will get my technology going. All right. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Thank you. All right. We're here today for board deliberations and potential vote on OneCare Vermont's FY25 budget. We'll do a review of all public comment that we've received. We'll review some options for budget modification and approval, followed by board questions, discussion, any additional public comment, and a potential vote. So through Monday, the 16th, we received 7 public comments related to OneCare's 2025 budget. We heard from several providers in favor of OneCare's regional care representative program. We heard from some independent providers who offered ideas for using any additional funding that they may receive. The Office of the Healthcare Advocate recommended that the board reduce OneCare's purchase services and labor costs by 30% of its current proposed budget and reallocate these funds to non-hospital owned independent primary care providers. They also recommended that the board redistribute all costs associated with advertising, lobbying, public relations, and travel to independent primary care providers. OneCare submitted public comment. They shared that their true wind down year is 2026, as all programs are planned to run throughout 2025. The RCR program is essential for success in 2025 and beyond, and they requested that any administrative cuts not surpass the amount of $957,000 that was presented to the board by staff on December 4th. So I do want to go through these. These are budget conditions that are consistent with previous years. We presented most of these on December 4th. These are bullet points that are representative of these conditions. They do not include the full language that has appeared in the past or that would technically appear in any budget order. But I will read through these. So first, OneCare must submit reports and information in accordance with the GMCB reporting manual, with authority delegated to the GMCB Health Policy Project Director to develop and modify these reporting requirements. I will just pause and note that in the past, there were some budget order conditions that appeared that could be interpreted as a reporting requirement. So if they are not seen in the conditions, it could be because the staff decided that we will simply roll those requirements into the reporting manual for 2025. Second, OneCare must notify the Green Mountain Care Board of any material changes to their budget and explain the variance. Third, OneCare must notify the Green Mountain Care Board of any use of their reserves or line of credit or any adjustments to participation fees with standard limitations for use of these funds. Next, over the duration of the all-payer model agreement, OneCare's administrative expenses must be less than the healthcare savings, included an estimate of cost avoidance and the value of improved health projected to be generated through the model. OneCare must implement benchmark trend rates for payer contracts in alignment with the GMCB's decision on the Medicare ACO benchmark. We just had the vote for that. The Green Mountain Care Board's Medicaid advisory rate case, and for commercial payer contracts in alignment with ACO attributed population and the GMCB approved rate filings. OneCare must engage in payer programs that qualify for all payer model scale to the greatest extent possible and align payer programs in key areas to the extent reasonable. They must explain non-scale qualifying programs in areas of misalignment, and we will require continued reporting on payer programs. OneCare should fund population health management and payment reform programs as detailed in the FY25 submission as potentially modified by this order, and notify GMCB of any changes, including funding shortfalls, changes in program scope, and an analysis for each program line as to line item as to whether and why the funding is appropriately scaled by attribution or some other factor. And lastly, OneCare must fund the support and services at home, or the SASH program, and the blueprint for health payments to primary care practices and community health teams consistent with the amount approved by the Green Mountain Care Board in the Medicare ACO benchmark process. These next two items are for consideration for the board as it goes for modifying OneCare's administrative budget. This first one, reduce OneCare's administrative budget by $1,457,713 and reallocate these funds to independent primary care practices, federally qualified health centers, designated agencies, home health agencies, and area agencies on aging. The method of distribution of these funds shall be at the discretion of the ACO. And on the following slide, I have a breakdown of the line items that went into that $1.4 million figure. The next option for modification for the board to consider is to require that OneCare adjust hospital participation fees at least once during 2025 to minimize hospital credits that are accumulated should revenues be outpacing expenditures. So related to that first budget modification option, that $1.4 million figure comes from the following bullet points. So we would level fund salary and benefit expenses from the FY24 projection. That would be a reduction of $634,771 from their proposed budget. We would eliminate the expense of the CFO position. The CFO has stepped into the CEO position for 2025, so that would be a reduction of $322,604. We would eliminate the expense of the benchmarking report and the valuation contract. The benchmarking report has been a requirement for a number of years now. The next time OneCare would receive or the board would receive updated data would be late in 2025. So the value of that report and of the evaluation contract has really decreased in their final program year. Next, eliminate expense on lobbying contract, which is $26,700. And eliminate expense of Board of Managers recruitment, which is $5,000. That was one of two items that fell into the bucket of advertising. The other item had to do with more of a networking opportunity for their providers to share best practices. So we kept that one in. So the total reduction would be $1,457,713. That would result in OneCare having an administrative budget of $11,294,649, which is about just over $400,000 less than the ACO's projected administrative expenses for the current year. And if we were to reallocate those funds to non-hospital providers in their network, you can see in that table what those dollar amounts were for 2024 and what they requested in 2025 versus if the board modifies their budget, it would be close to $10 million flowing to these providers. And that is inclusive only of population health management program dollars. It doesn't include CPR or any of the other population health programs. So here is some template motion language. I'll flag Mark and see if he would like to walk the board through this or say anything else at this point.
Yeah, thanks, Michelle. I'll just touch on a few things. First, this is a template motion to approve OneCare's budget with modifications. I'll note that the start of the motion, just for the sake of clarity, incorporates the risk mitigation decision and order that the board issued in July of this year. Usually that's part of the budget order, but this year at OneCare's request, the board held a hearing and dealt with that matter earlier. The second part of this is that if you look at part one, that's the breakout of administrative reduction that Michelle just went over with the list of providers in OneCare's network that would receive those funds. The second item is the requirement that hospital participation fees be adjusted to align with projected expenditures. And then three incorporates the conditions that Michelle went over. And Chair Foster, I'll turn it to you.
Thank you. I think as with before, I'll make the motion, see if there's a second, and then have board member comment and discussion. So I move to approve OneCare's budget with modifications, incorporating this board's fiscal year 25 risk mitigation decision order, and move to approve OneCare's fiscal year 25 budget with the following modifications. With a $1,457,713 reduction to OneCare's administrative budget. This sum shall be reallocated to the following types of providers in OneCare's existing network: independent primary care practices, FQHCs, designated agencies, home health agencies, area agencies on aging. The method of distribution of these funds shall be at the discretion of the ACO, with a requirement that hospital participation fees be adjusted at least once during 2025 to align with updates to OneCare's projected fiscal year 25 expenditures, and subject to the budget conditions presented today by GMCB staff.
Second.
I'll just say my quick views on this, which is I really appreciated the staff's hard work on reviewing this budget. It's obviously a very different budget than in prior years with a wind down coming of the operations. I think it's a very fair budget for OneCare. It's not significantly lower than what we project for fiscal year 24, yet it does allow for significant reallocation to some areas of our healthcare system that need significant investment. So the $1.45 million, I think, will really be helpful to the other healthcare providers noted in the motion. And so I appreciate that recommendation, and I agree with it. And also, there's a little bit of relief to the hospitals should there be some lower expenditures in fiscal year 25, as we saw with fiscal year 24. So I think this is a well-balanced recommendation, and I support it.
I do have a question on the wording of the second provision here, which is the intent that the fees be adjusted only if there's a downward or either way? Because the way I would read it now, it could go up or down, and just wanting to understand if that was what we were expecting.
I think the intent was that if the expenses are lower than anticipated, that they would be adjusted downward.
So I'm just wondering, I'm fine with that. I was just thinking that it should be clear that the requirement is a downward adjustment, and then an upward adjustment is discretionary.
Sure. Should we work to modify the language for that part of the motion, Robin?
I think so, and let me give it a shot. So I think what I would.
Just one question first, Robin. Do we need to do that? If they increase the participation fees, would it butt up against the total administrative budget?
Right, that's true. But then our requirement would be then at odds with our order of it, right? So then we would have an order that was created an inconsistency between two parts of the order.
I think I don't see any objection to clarifying it.
I think, and Mark, I don't know if you have any thoughts, but I think it could be as simple as saying, with a requirement that hospital participation fees be adjusted at least once during 2025 to align with reductions to OneCare's projected fiscal year 25 expenditures.
Yeah, I think that language works well as a friendly amendment and aligns with the staff's thinking.
I would accept and approve the friendly amendment.
How about you as the
Yeah,
seconder?
I do too.
Thank you. Okay, great. Thanks. That was my question.
Any other board member discussion or questions? Any comment from the healthcare advocate?
Chair Foster, except for our written comments that we submitted. Thank you.
And I'll open up to public comment via raise the hand. Walter, how are you?
Hey, Owen, how are you doing, man?
Well,
I just wanted to say I support the healthcare advocates comment, and I wonder if it's possible to reduce the OneCare's budget even further, but who knows? I also wondered if there was a way to do an evaluation of the good, if OneCare did us any good or not, considering all the money we've spent on it over the years.
Thank you for the comment, Walter. I think that there are two documents that tried to take a look at and probe the question you asked, and the auditor had done a report a few years ago, and the Care Board, in response to an auditor request, also published something, I believe it was this April or May, addressing that. It's a difficult analysis, but the staff put together an analysis, and also OneCare had done one as well through a contractor. So there are three different looks out there on that question. Whether or not there'll be another one in the future, I don't know. It's obviously something you have to invest in time and money to do it. So I'm not sure if there will be.
All right.
Any other public comment? Why don't we do a roll call vote, just in the event that we don't have everyone aligned on this. I didn't get a sense from comments from the board. So I think it'd be better to do a roll call.
All right, and as a reminder, this is a roll call on the motion that is currently presented that Chair Foster read with the friendly amendment added by Member Lunge. And we'll start with Member Holmes, I believe.
Yes.
Member Lunge,
Yes.
Member Walsh,
Yes.
and Chair Foster.
Yes.
Motion approved with 4 board members voting yes and with Member Merman absent.
Thank you very much, Mark. And I want to thank OneCare as well for their presentation and their public comment, which was very helpful in considering these issues. So thank you, everyone. Thank you very much, Michelle. The last agenda item is the head model update. And I see Director Kraus. Brendan, do you have everyone from your side that you need?
I believe that we do. Yes.
Okay, great. Why don't we have you introduce yourselves, and then the floor is yours.
Okay, great. I'll start. Hi, I'm Brendan Krause, Director of Healthcare Reform at the Agency of Human Services. I'll hand off to Sarah.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Rosenblum. I'm the Deputy Director for Healthcare Reform at the Agency for Human Services.
Brendan, I have the slides ready to go if you want me
Oh,
to
you
share
do?
them.
Oh, thank you. Oh, I appreciate that.
Unless
No,
there were
no.
any last minute changes from when I spoke with Sarah. Okay.
Absolutely not.
Sorry to interrupt.
No,
Anyone
no,
else from
thank
your
you.
team? Can you
Fran or
see these
Pat?
okay?
Sorry, yeah.
Good.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And Sarah, just let me know when you'd like me to advance.
So I will kick us off here. So let's advance, please. First, I'd like just to say thank you to colleagues and thank you for having us today. But thank you to colleagues both at the Green Mountain Care Board and at the Agency of Human Services, in particular, board members Lunge and Merman and staff member Michelle Degree. And then from my AHS colleagues, I'd like to thank especially Deputy Healthcare Reform Director Sarah Rosenblum, Secretary Jenny Samuelson, Administrative Services Director Fran Hodgins, and Health Services Researcher Jeff Batista. So thanks for your partnership, and especially members Lunge and Merman, please jump in if I get anything wrong. So we can go on to the next one, please. So just a bit of background. I know that many of you will have heard a lot of this before, so we'll try to get to the detail quickly, but just want to bring everybody up to speed. So since its acceptance into the AHEAD model by the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Innovation, which is the part of Medicare, part of the Department of Health and Human Services federally that negotiates payment models, we've been jointly negotiating terms with the federal government with our colleagues at the Green Mountain Care Board. In terms of other states that have been accepted into the agreement in cohort 1, which we were, which means the model would begin in January 2026, should we choose cohort 1. For reference, that's in December 2025 is when the existing all-payer model ends. So that would be in that scenario that we would go directly from one model into another. And for those interested in seeing Maryland's AHEAD state agreement, they've already signed and executed their agreement, and it is online at the website that you see there. As I said, Vermont was accepted into cohort 1, but the state has not yet signed an agreement committing us to participate in AHEAD. We've agreed with CMS to some key terms, and those were presented last week or the week before, and are available on the state's website, the agency's website. Next slide, please. So this is in response to some questions that came up in the last meeting from some board members that, so this isn't new information, but it's presented in a way that hopefully is a bit more digestible, just to lay out the key model milestones. So we're currently in a pre-implementation period. So that's what began when we started negotiating in 2024. And that's an 18-month period, which would basically end at the end of 2025. During that period, we received the initial draft of the state agreement and the hospital and submit a hospital global budget methodology to CMS that was completed earlier this year or in the summer. We also submitted a Medicaid primary care alternative payment model and Medicaid hospital global budget regulatory change proposal to be completed in July. We refine and update Medicare fee-for-service hospital global budget methodology, which would be submitted in this scenario in the cohort 1 to CMS in early 2025. We design an East Fund, which would be a state-specific mechanism to distribute savings that are achieved through the gap between the total cost of care and the baseline increase that was negotiated between the state and CMS. And that the internal state timeline for that development would be fall of 2024, which is now obviously to spring of 2025. And in this process, we would also design the Medicaid Hospital Global Budget methodology. 6 months after the award date, so that's January of next year, we would establish the model governance structure and execute the state agreement regardless of the cohort selected. And so that'll become a bit more clear as we move on. But there are 2 cohorts that are on the table. Cohort 1, which again would start right as the other model ends in 2026, and cohort 2, which would be a year later. So 12 months prior to the start of performance year 1, so in cohort 1, January, the Medicaid Hospital Global Methodology would be submitted to CMS, and so for cohort 1, that would be January of 25. For cohort 2, January 26. 6 months prior to the start of implementation year 1, so assuming cohort 1, that would be next July, we would the state would obtain letters of interest from hospitals that are interested in participating in the Medicare fee-for-service hospital global budgets. CMS would approve the Medicaid Hospital Global Budget methodology. I struggle with that word. Draft execution order we would draft an execution order to create a total cost of care and primary care spending targets, or process to set those targets. And then 3 months prior to implementation, so October in cohort 1, October 2025, the state would demonstrate the readiness of the Medicaid Hospital Global Budget implementation and primary care alternate payment model. We would have to demonstrate to CMS that we had 10% of Medicare fee-for-service net patient revenue in the model in the first year. So what that means is for Medicare Parts A and B, that we have 10% of what is spent in a hospital in the state enrolled in the model. So we'd have to have a hospital that represented that amount, or a combination of hospitals that represented that amount of spending in the model. And then finalize the executive order to create the total cost of care and primary care spending targets. And by the end of the pre-implementation period, the state is required to finalize its statewide health equity plan. So next slide, please, Michelle. So some key milestones in terms of the performance year. So in performance year 1, again, for cohort 1, that would be 2026. For cohort 2, that would be 2027. The state would implement the primary care ahead and Medicaid primary care aid alternative payment model, including, for example, Blueprint for Health, and that would go live. So basically the new model goes live in the first performance year. The state would implement Medicare hospital global budgets, again, with 10% of Medicare fee-for-service net patient revenue enrolled in the program. Measurement of Medicare fee-for-service total cost of care, fee-for-service primary care investment, and statewide equity and equity targets begin. And the East Fund to redistribute the delta between the savings, the delta between the total cost of care spent and the savings achieved would be launched. In October of performance year 1, all payer total cost of care and primary care investment targets would be memorialized in an amended state agreement. And in December, implementation of Medicaid hospital global budgets would begin, and we would submit to CMS the state's plan to use the available state or legislative regulatory authority to ensure commercial payer adoption of the commercial hospital global budget methodology, which would occur in performance year 2. Performance year 2, so 2027 or 2028, depending on the cohort. In January, the measurement of all payer total cost of care growth and all payer primary care investment targets begins. Implementation of Medicare hospital global budgets. At this point, the state must have 50% of Medicare fee-for-service hospital net patient revenue, so 50% of A and B spend enrolled in the state. We would establish a commercial hospital global budget methodology. This is for no later than performance year 2, so 27 or 28. Vermont must ensure that at least one commercial payer offers a commercial hospital global budget model. And then potential implementation of Medicare primary care capitated track under the primary care ahead. CMS is currently evaluating this option. Sorry. Okay, next slide, please. And so performance year 3. So 2028 or 2029. January, implementation of Medicare hospital global budgets. At this point, the state must enroll 80% of Medicare fee-for-service hospital net patient revenue. Vermont ensures commercial payer adoption of the commercial hospital global budget methodology starting in this performance year 3. In November, the state would finalize the Medicare fee-for-service investment and access targets for at least performance year 4. Performance year 4, implementation of Medicare hospital global budgets must include 80% of Medicare fee-for-service hospital NPR. Measurement of Medicare fee-for-service investment and access targets begin. Performance year 5 and beyond. In January, implementation of Medicare hospital global budgets at this point must include at least 85% of Medicare fee-for-service hospital net patient revenue. Next slide, please. And so now I'm going to hand off to my colleague, Deputy Healthcare Reform Director Sarah Rosenblum, to save my voice and also to walk us through the updated state agreement that we received on the 16th of December. Thank you, Sarah.
Thanks, Brendan. Okay, so as Brendan alluded to earlier in the presentation, AHS and GMCB on a board meeting last week presented some key terms, the term sheet that were negotiated terms between the state and CMS at that point in time, a week ago, which seems like a lifetime ago. And on Monday, we got the latest state agreement from CMS. Michelle, you can go to the next slide. So the state agreement is the actual document that eventually the 3 signatories, meaning AHS, GMCB, and the governor's office, will have to sign if the state chooses to move forward with AHEAD. The state agreement, which has was posted this week to AHS's website and to GMCB's website, is still a draft. So we are still in negotiation. The items in the state agreement are still being discussed. However, in the interest of discussion and transparency, we're sharing the latest we have, which are the terms we've negotiated up until this point, or up until the point of the 16th. So as part of today's presentation, we're not going to go through all the terms again. We're going to go through just those that changed from what we presented last week. And then we're going to talk about some aspects of the agreement that we haven't had a chance to talk very much in depth about because they're more, they're related to enforcement and termination. They're kind of normal, quote unquote, terms that are in CMS's agreements and aren't unique to AHEAD. But we're going to spend some time on them today because we haven't had public discussion on them yet. But before I do that, Brendan, I see your hands raised. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Yes, I misspoke. I'm really sorry. Just to go back to those percentages, 10%, 50%, 80%. This is hospital inpatient and outpatient facility net patient revenue, not all of Parts A and B. I'm sorry about that. The total cost of care targets are based on Medicare Parts A and B. So thank you for that correction, and I apologize.
Okay. Thanks, Brendan. All right, Michelle, I think you can go to the next one.
I will just chime in to add that the board has not updated our website with the state agreement yet, but I promise it's coming. So that link is where it will live. It's just not there yet. So I do apologize.
No, thanks for flagging, Michelle. Okay, so as I mentioned, we're going to start by just touching on the terms that have changed since we presented last week, or that there have been contextual changes that we want you all to be aware of. Next slide. Okay. So the first one is related to the baseline and the total cost of care methodology. That in and of itself has not changed since we presented it last week. However, there has been a contextual change, which is that through our negotiations with CMS, there is a new provision that we're calling a guardrail provision added, that if our currently the baseline is based on 2023 claims. If we were to look at Vermont's fee-for-service growth in 2024 or 2025, and those are more than a percentage point higher in Vermont compared to national growth, that would be accounted for in our total cost of care. So as we've been going back and forth with CMS, I think the fact that we have to rely on 2023 data, which is unfortunate, but a factor because we don't even have 2024 data yet. This was something that we inserted to try and make us feel a little bit more comfortable that if things change drastically, or not even drastically, if they change significantly in 2024 or 2025, it would be accounted for in the methodology. Next slide, Michelle. Okay, similar, just contextual change here related to the hospital global budget operations incentive. The overall policy is not changing here. Hospitals who participate would receive an upward PPS adjustment of 2 to 3%. However, just wanted to clarify, we've gotten a lot of questions related to critical access hospitals, which are substantially in this model as part of CMS's core design of it. So we have received clarification from CMS that if a critical access hospital chooses to participate in the model, it has no bearing on their designation as a critical access hospital. They're still a critical access hospital even when they're in the model. If they were to exit the model, they would return to their critical access hospital payment reimbursement methodology that they're used to today. So I know there's been a lot of questions about what happens if you join and then you leave. If those CAs were to join and then exit the model, they would revert to their traditional CA payments. Next slide. Okay, and then I know we've talked a lot in public meetings about the Equity Access and Statewide Transformation Fund, or the EAST Fund, that we have negotiated with CMS as part of this model. This policy has changed a bit since we presented it last week. We received additional clarification in the latest state agreement draft that GMCB, as part of their permissions under the law, would be able to direct one or more hospitals to contribute a specified portion of their hospital revenue to the EAST Fund. So this development comes from back and forth discussions related to, if we have this fund of money, what is the most appropriate way to direct those funds? What are the ways we can do so legally? And what makes the most sense for Vermont? And we have progress this forward to the point where GMCB would be able to direct those funds to one or more entities in the model. Next slide. Okay, and payer participation. This is a small update as well. So on this slide, we say that commercial payers would have to participate, or at least one commercial payer would have to participate in the model by PY2. In the most recent state agreement draft, there was a change to the definition of commercial payer. So the definition of commercial payer was changed to refer to health insurance plans that hold a certificate of authority from Vermont's Commissioner of Financial Regulation. Okay. Oh, one more, sorry. Same deal here. Oh, my lights just went out in my office, so give me 1 sec to move and turn them back on. Okay. Hospital global budget incentives, this policy change is just a contextual one. So again, if we did clarify with CMS that if CMS terminates the model, that participant hospitals would be able to, would not have to repay the incentive, that upward adjustment that they receive for participating. They would not have to repay those funds if CMS chooses to end the model. All right, and I think that might be the last term change. Yes. Okay, so as I said at the top, we're going to move now to talking a little bit about enforcement and termination. And that's because we haven't had the opportunity to do so in previous meetings. So essentially, the term sheet in the state agreement represents our contract with CMS. So what happens if not everything goes according to plan? So CMS is allowed in the agreement to have to take enforcement action upon the state if there is a triggering event. There are many triggering events in the state agreement. So if folks are curious, I encourage you to look at the actual agreement to section 20 specifically if you want to look at all of them. But this slide has several of them. And I think these examples, I think, are helpful to understand kind of the flavor of triggering events, which is if the state is not able to uphold what our responsibilities under the agreement, that would essentially be a triggering event. So we need to establish our growth and investment targets. We need to establish our budget methodologies. We need to have participation rates that we agree to with CMS. And if we're not able to meet those commitments, then that would be a triggering event that CMS could take action upon us for. Next slide, please. There are some factors related to those triggering events. So CMS can kind of take into account the totality of events that led to the triggering event. So if there's like market reasons a triggering event may have occurred, they could take those into account. The state could also demonstrate that an exogenous factor caused our triggering event. And we could also say that a delay in a CMS deliverable led us to be delayed in something that contributed to a triggering event. And then in response to a triggering event, CMS could adjust our Medicare fee-for-service payments. And we could also request an adjustment to one or more of our payments to avoid a triggering event if we so chose. Next slide, please, Michelle. And if CMS determines that there is a triggering event, they will send us a warning notice. We, the state, would then respond to that warning notice with a plan dependent upon whatever the triggering event was. And then if CMS did not believe that our response to the warning notice was sufficient, they could then issue an enforcement action notice, which would outline the action that they plan to take against the state. Next slide.
I'll just add a quick commentary here that this is the same process under the current Vermont all-payer model agreement. We also have the same triggering event timeline. It's 60 days for a warning notice. It follows the same language.
Thank you, Michelle. Okay, and then what are those enforcement actions that CMS could take? Those are all listed on this slide. They could take one or more of these actions, including requiring us to implement a corrective action plan. They could require us to modify our budget methodologies, to provide additional information, to conduct additional monitoring, auditing, or both, to approve new safeguards or programmatic features, make prospective payments, and modify or terminate Medicare payment waiver or waivers. Next slide, please. Okay, so those were enforcement provisions. Those are different things CMS could do if we didn't uphold all the elements of our agreement. There are also termination provisions. So both CMS and the state could terminate the agreement if they or us so chose. We're going to start by talking about how reasons in which CMS could terminate the agreement. So they could terminate the agreement for a variety of reasons that are listed on this slide, including that if the state fails to submit, obtain approval for, implement, or comply with a corrective action plan, or if we have not complied with CMS enforcement that we just walked through. They could also terminate if our Medicare hospital global budget methodology is not approved by April 1st, 2025. That's assuming, I think, a cohort 1 start date. Next slide, please, Michelle. CMS could also terminate the model if it doesn't meet the requirements under federal law related to CMMI demonstrations. So that's what this number 2 on the slide is showing. So CMMI has statutory authority to develop models as long as they meet the A, B, and C, 2A, B, C on this slide, goals, meaning that they improve quality of care, reduce spending. And if a model doesn't do that, doesn't meet the triple aim, CMMI could terminate the model. And that 2D is saying that termination could occur at any time after the model has begun. And then finally, we get to the state termination provisions. So the state, in addition to CMS, could also terminate the agreement. Right, or in the pre-implementation period, so before the model goes live, we could terminate with 30 days notice. And then after the model is live in the implementation period, we could terminate with 180 days notice. Okay, and then I think this might be the last slide before we open it up for discussion. Yes. And this slide is a little bit of a different flavor than the last one, so I just want to recognize that. And we just wanted to provide some space to talk about the hospital global budget methodology. And I'm going to start here, but I welcome our GMCB colleagues to chime in, as the global budget methodology would be established under the premise of GMCB's Hospital Budget Review Authority. So we would need to develop this methodology. We've submitted a draft of it to CMS, and it would need to be, if we move forward with AHEAD, it would need to be revised and resubmitted to CMS. There are 2 options for what this Medicare global budget could look like. So the first is using a CMS methodology with the hospital global budget incentive payment, and 1 or more hospital budgets would include blueprint and SASH dollars and funds to go to the East Fund. The second option is that the state would calculate its own methodology, which would be submitted to CMS and revised through an approval process, and CMS would validate the state's own calculation. In either option, hospitals could request modifications, and the state would review those requests and make a recommendation to CMS. I think in either option, but Robin can keep me honest, service line adjustment processes are outlined in the state agreement and would require state recommendation and then CMS approval. And currently, if you look at the state agreement draft, it reflects option number 1, that we are using CMS's methodology with some twists for our East Fund, but ultimately we are not calculating using our own methodology. But this is still something that we are going back and forth on and discussing in the context of the broader elements of the model. So of course, if we decide to do our own methodology that's totally state specific, that could have implications for implementation and which cohort we want to be a part of. And we're kind of considering all those different variables when discussing the methodology for hospital global budgets. But I'll pause there in case my GMCB colleagues have anything they want to add to that summary.
You did a great job, Sarah.
Thanks, Robin.
You're welcome.
And if not, I think we can pull the slides down and just for the sake of discussion or leave the discussion slide up, I defer to you, Michelle. For folks' awareness, the slides today have the rest of the term sheet slides that were presented a week ago that weren't changed and didn't have any sort of contextual changes in the most recent state agreement, but they are there for reference in case anyone is curious.
All right, thank you both very much for the overview, and we'll make sure the state agreement draft gets updated to our website. And also I'll note that the draft hospital global budget methodology that was submitted last, I think it was June, is publicly available, as is what we call the CMS off-the-shelf model that we got. I forget when we got that. So I'll open up to any board member questions or comments.
I'll just jump in. I just wanted to say that I'd be curious to hear in public comment, not necessarily today, but obviously if folks are interested in submitting something in writing, but more like input on the hospital budget choices. I think there's some pros and cons to each of the options. And if any of our stakeholders have thoughts, I'd love to understand their positions and thoughts on that. So just wanted to throw that out there in case anyone wanted to chime in today or send something in sooner than later.
Might just quickly piggyback off that, saying that I was going to have a similar comment, that I'm really interested in hearing public comment on the rest of the term sheet as well, the provisions in the term sheet. So anything on the global budget methodology and the term sheet and those choices between the budget methodologies would be really helpful.
I'll jump in. Just have some questions building off my comments from last week. And well, first, thank you, Sarah, and thank you, Brendan, for the presentation last week and this week. Brendan, it's good to see you again. I'm glad you're back. The termination clauses on either way, it looks like we still have Blueprint and SASH funding tied to this program. So I want to make sure that I understand, if we withdraw from the agreement, that would cut the SASH and Blueprint funding. Is that correct? Yes. Yeah.
The Medicare portion, yes.
Yep. And if CMS terminates, that would negate that funding stream as well. Correct?
Yes, I would say yes. This is Robin. I'll jump in. Because basically what CMS has articulated is that the only available funding stream is through the hospital global budget. So regardless of the ahead model, like if we were to apply for a different CMS model, those also would not include Blueprint or SASH. So there's not another choice available to the state in terms of Medicare dollars.
I see. And so it's not really realistic to have them separated out in the state agreement. But it continues to worry me that the incoming administration may slash these programs. And we have no backup plan. I've been talking about this for a while now, that funding for those two programs is tied up in programs that previously haven't worked as well as we wanted. And we're looking at an agreement that would continue to tie those funds up in a way that I'm not confident will actually receive the funding, and that it will continue. That worries me. I wish we were spending some time thinking about what to do about Blueprint and SASH. The service line adjustments that were talked about this week and last week, those strike me as being kind of in the opposite direction to where we want to go as a state with certificate of need. We're lightening our touch with certificate of need, but creating a certificate of need-like program for any service line change within a participating facility. I'd like to see more public comment about the pros and cons of that. That seems particularly onerous. I'm still struggling a bit with the East Fund. The terminology today seemed like money for the East Fund would flow into a hospital, and then the Green Mountain Care Board would be able to redistribute those funds. How does that hospital get those funds? Is it just because we're participating, they're extra Medicare funds, or do they have to treat more patients and earn the money? Where does that money come from?
I'll jump in. So the concept behind the money that flows to the East Fund is that through, again, the mechanism for the state to access additional Medicare dollars is through a hospital global budget. It doesn't have to be every hospital's global budget. That budget process, the board's role there would be to determine the dollars that flow through that hospital for these purposes. And I think the current thinking is there needs to be more work on what governing body then directs those funds from that hospital to other providers and for what types of projects. So I don't think there's and that would be a state process, not a state federal process, that latter piece.
Okay. That's helpful. That we'd still need to iron out the deciding body. But essentially, the East Fund is money from Medicare because we're agreeing to do global budgets, in addition to the money that we would earn from taking care of patients.
And it is in addition to money that the hospital would earn taking care of patients. I would say it's the why is broader than that. I think that, there's more to ahead than just the global budgets. There's the increased dollars to primary care.
Yeah.
But the argument we made was that, Vermont has taken seriously the job of moving towards transformation, but transformation needs funding, and that in the past, when the state has done these kinds of projects, it's been the state dime that is funding the transformation. So you can see this as a Medicare component to supporting multi-payer transformation. I don't know, Brendan or Sarah or Dave, if you want to chime in, but that's how I would explain it.
The one caveat I was going to give to that is that if the way I thought you initially asked the question, Tom, you're like, is there, there's money that a hospital earns for taking care of patients, and there's the East Fund. However, if hospitals overall, or not just hospitals, but the money that provider organizations earn from taking care of patients in Vermont goes up higher than the East Fund, potential money shrinks. So it's not an additive fixed amount. It's the difference between the money that's earned taking care of patients and this benchmark.
Right. Thank you. That was where I was going. So smart people wanting me to go faster. I'll try. So we could also lose out on that money if we don't meet quality benchmarks. Is that correct?
I don't know that that's correct, but I guess I'd want to go back and look at the language.
It's similar to MOCRA, MIPS, ACOs, prior all-payer model. You could meet the savings requirements, but if your quality suffered, you'd not get the shared savings. So I
Right,
think
I see where you're going. Yep, no, this is not structured in that same way, no. So it's not structured like an ACO shared savings program where there's like a quality floor that you have to meet before you can reach the shared savings. So it's a different concept.
Okay. I'd like to make sure that I understand that, because I thought it was similar, but I don't know this as well as you all do. And that the East Fund, the total amount, is that if we make our 10% participation in the first year, do we get the total East Fund saving or 10% of it? Is there any tie to how much participation we have? Because the number seemed quite large last week. I mentioned this. Compared to the whole system, it's not particularly large, but it does seem like a big chunk of money. It seems like it'd be hard to walk away from, but it sounded like we had to do very little to get it. And that makes me wonder what.
Yeah, there's agreement among the state partners that we want all access to all of the money. So not just the proportion, you know, if we have 10% in the first year, that we would get 100%, not 10% of the funds. We are still going back and forth with CMS on the actual like black and white language that would convey that in a state agreement.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. So I didn't see that any language like that in the agreement, but I saw it very late last night. So,
Tom, one other thing on that is that the East Fund is defined further in the hospital global budget methodology, which is yet to be integrated into the global budget methodology or approved by CMMI. So there is sort of another hurdle to get through to ensure that the way that we convey to CMMI in a way they agree with, and how we want to use that funding to get the funding, because it still could be contingent even in the global budget methodology.
There's a long way to go still with negotiating. I understand it's a big thing. And we would need to get to 50% by year 2. I forget, does somebody have off the top of their head, what was the highest amount of participation we had in the first all-payer model? Did we get over 50%?
In Medicare, I don't recall that. It was a different metric, so it was people, not NPR. So so I'm not sure how to translate between the two exactly.
Kind of apples and oranges.
If you look at scale, we're over 50%, but that's, you know, as Robin's saying, they're not the same. They're not counting the same thing.
Okay.
Tom, I just wanted to circle back to your one of your other questions, which was about the quality measures. And I think so far, I mean, it's really about the financial benchmarks, meeting the financial benchmarks on the East Fund amount. As sort of Robin says, it's not quality based like the shared savings.
Okay. I appreciate that, Brendan. I think the reason that I think we need to pay close attention to that is that prior history with alternative payment models before they were called APMs, history has shown that organizations can decrease their Medicare expenses by stinting care, something that Dave has often talked of, and by speeding it up. And by speeding it up, quality has suffered. So the quality benchmarks were added to ACO's shared savings plans because quality had suffered under these plans prior to the development of ACOs. So I'd be surprised if they pulled it out. But again, I have not been in depth with this material like you all have been. So it's the percent participation is calculated differently, and now it's a proportion of NPR. That seems to work in our advantage, rather than number of people. That's interesting. And I didn't see in the agreement whether this was whether participation was. It doesn't seem as though it will be mandatory if we're having these 10%, 50% requirements, 80% requirements. Is the idea still that this would be a voluntary program?
At the moment, yes, we're still discussing in the context of it being a voluntary program.
But that's a state decision, not a federal requirement.
Right. So that I understand, and I understand that there are political considerations and getting participation, but the health policy evidence regarding these plans is that voluntary programs have not worked. One of the big things that I asked last week, and there's nowhere in the state agreement to talk about it, nor was there in the term sheet. I remain concerned. I just want to mention the concern again about the cost of administering programs like this. We're talking about changing a very large health system, the state's health system, in order to bring in the East Fund money, which is millions of dollars a year, but in a billions of dollar industry. There's not a lot of money for changing the whole system. So I think it's easy to get lured by the idea of extra money coming in, but there's no discussion of the cost to do what we need to do to earn it. And that continues to be a concern of mine. Thanks for the conversation. Thanks for answering the questions. I appreciate, like I said last week, I don't like being pessimistic, but I appreciate the conversation, and I appreciate you answering the questions and hearing me out. So thank you very much.
And I'm sorry to keep going back to, we're just trying to make sure that we bottom out get you all the answers to your question about the quality. Just to clarify, the East Fund is about the financial targets, but there would be corrective action if a state didn't meet quality targets, and hospitals' global budgets themselves would be adjusted if they don't meet the quality targets, but it's not tied to the fund.
Okay. Thank you, Brendan, and whoever was busy researching that while we were talking, thank you to them as well.
Can I just ask a question on that? Because maybe I need some clarity on this too. And I don't think I would have needed a document search on this one too. So if quality targets are related to the hospital global budgets, but the East Fund is funded through the hospital global budgets, so I assume it would be possible then for quality targets to impact the potential funding to the East Fund. But I guess since we haven't defined that through the global budget methodology yet, we don't know, but it would seem reasonable that there could be some relationship there.
I think the quality targets that were outlined in the CMS methodology for the hospital global budget are the existing hospital quality programs. So like the readmission rate, et cetera, just in case that's helpful.
Yeah.
I think there are 6 of them.
Thanks.
Are the quality penalties greater or less than what they would currently experience, or the same?
They're the same in the CMS methodology, and I think that what we had put, and again, it's been a while since I looked at our submission from last summer, but I believe the state decision was to start with the CMS methodology, and then as we're working through a statewide quality framework, proposing changes in the future. I guess that's the other piece to just keep in mind with the hospital global budget, is that it's not set in stone. It can evolve over time.
I have no other questions for this time. We've been working quite a bit behind the scenes lately, and just thank you to everyone for doing that. My only other comment is that we do appreciate any written public comment on this. I'll quote the Grateful Dead. It must be getting early. The clocks are running late. So time is of the essence, and we really appreciate everyone taking a look at all the draft state agreement and methodologies for feedback. Any other board member discussion or comments at this point?
I just wanted to respond once more to that same thread, which is that the quality targets wouldn't affect the fund. It would affect the budget itself, but not the amount of money that's available. I guess let's put it that way. But I'll let others clarify that because I might not be doing a very good job of explaining that.
Michelle?
It's separate from the issue Brendan just raised. So if someone wants to add commentary to that, I'll hold. Maybe not. Okay, I just wanted to flag that per our presentation last week, we are hoping to get all written public comment in no later than January 3rd. I recognize that we're entering holiday season and that is difficult, but our goal is to work with CMMI to have sort of a next draft of the state agreement the week of the 6th. So in order to incorporate those public comments, we would need to have received them no later than January 3rd, which is Friday.
And I'll just flag some of the timing considerations that are out there and some of the key terms that are under discussion. I think the team described the East Fund and the East Fund clarity that we're looking for. That's one of them. Another question is like, if the state terminates the agreement, do the hospitals have to repay the transformation funds that they received? Another is what happens, how do we deal with if we were to leave the model for whatever reason? We're going to be in a bit of an urgent situation if we want to continue Blueprint and SASH and any primary care support. Another big decision point is cohort 1, cohort 2, timing issues, voluntary versus mandatory. So if it's voluntary and we need to be at 50% in year 2, that would take that's a significant size hospital that would need to sign up. And if they don't, and it's voluntary, does the state mandate it so that we don't lose Blueprint and SASH or other funding? And then who mandates it? So there's so many variables that can happen kind of unexpectedly. So we appreciate feedback on all of those as we try and move forward. There is time reserved on the board calendar for a potential vote, I think might even be noticed. The week of January 13th, 15th, somewhere in there. So that's on the calendar as something that we'll look at. The deadline for the submission of the methodology would be end of January, and then the deadline for actual signatures would be June or end of June of next summer if we do not go forward with a vote or any party doesn't go forward in January at the earlier date. So just wanted to flag those, and I'll turn it over to the healthcare advocate for any comment they may have.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, everyone. I feel like the HCA's made some pretty recent comments. Those may have been just last week. But I'll just say that there continue to be a lot of unknowns, pretty substantial unknowns that seem really key to this decision. And then I'll also just say, I know, I don't mean this to be whataboutism. I know this meeting is about, this discussion is about ahead, but I also feel like at this stage, I need to keep saying, I feel a little bit like I'm living in a twilight zone. There's really urgent things in front of us that are well before ahead being able to address. And I continue to focus on those as some of our more substantial risks to Vermonters being able to get the care they need.
Thank you, Mike. I'll open it up to public comment via raise the hand. Walter?
I just echo Mike's concerns, and also Tom Walsh pretty much spoke what was rankling me. I'm just curious about we're spending how much to get how much in federal funds, but I echo both concerns on those.
Thank you, Walter. Other public comment at this time? Hey, Michelle, Sarah, Brendan, and Fran, thank you very much for your continued partnership and work with us on these and for attending today and presenting.
Thank you.
I think we have no other substance. I did have new business to bring up. Donna Jerry has run our Certificate of Need program for a very long time here at the board, really since our inception. She began serving Vermonters on August 31st, 1992, working as a healthcare planner for the Health Policy Council. And one of the responsibilities was a Certificate of Need process. The CON process is intended, as everyone knows, to prevent unnecessary duplication of healthcare facilities and services, guide establishment in order to best serve public needs, promote cost containment, and ensure the provision and equitable allocation of high-quality healthcare services, resources to all Vermonters, which is a really important task in a state that is rural and difficult to drive in. So Donna has had an over 32-year career, and she's ensured that the care board's CON applications are reviewed very thoroughly and completely, and she takes her responsibilities very seriously and has done an amazing job. She's developed and maintained excellent working relationships with Vermont hospitals while helping guide them through the sometimes difficult CON process. She is renowned throughout the state for her knowledge of the healthcare system and her commitment to excellence and attention to detail, as anyone who has submitted a CON process well knows, and we appreciate. She's also known for her deep love of her family and her friends, and will always go above and beyond to support them and her colleagues here at the Care Board. She is set to retire at the end of December, and we wanted to thank her for her service to the state. One of the things I appreciate about Donna the most is that she is always willing to evolve and try and improve her process. She's really open-minded to how can we do the CON process better, and she's really an exemplary state employee. So thank you, Donna, for your 32 plus years of service. Donna will be spending a lot of her retirement time skiing and hiking, and she loves the outdoors, and she will continue to be around the Montpelier area. And we know that we'll get to see her, and we hope that everyone else in the healthcare community does as well, and in state government. So thank you very, very much, Donna. Seeing nothing else on the agenda, I will move to adjourn the hearing today.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. I don't believe we have a hearing between now and the holidays, so I hope we don't, but I wish everyone a happy holiday and look forward to next year. Thank you very much. We are adjourned.